Welcome everyone out there in vinyl community land. This is Mark with Vinyl Crush, and I'm here today with Michael from Noted and Archived. Hi, Michael.
Hey, great to be with you, Mark.
That's great. So we've been talking about doing a video together for a long time, and it's really great that we get to do this now. One, just because I love your collections and hearing you talk and what you have to say, and two, because your band Balmorhea has a new album out. And I would love to talk a little bit today. We have some albums we want to show that we've been listening to like we usually do, but also I want to talk a little bit about Balmorhea and the music that you guys are doing.
Yep, let's do it.
Cool. So, and Balmorhea is it basically the group is two people, is that right? You and Rob Lowe?
Yep, Rob and I met and kind of we met in 2000 actually. Kind of realized we had a lot of similar overlaps in our listening and stuff we were playing, and he had a bunch of piano songs and I had some guitar songs, and we started hanging out and playing music together, and he's like, oh, you should add guitar to this song, and I was like, oh, I have that, you should add a piano line to this, and we kind of, it was just kind of jamming, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then we looked up a few months later and we're like, oh, we have like 12 tracks, we should record this. So it wasn't planned, it was totally organic, just like hanging out over our love of music. So,
and you guys have like 9 albums out now, isn't that right?
we have 7 studio albums and a live album and like a handful of EPs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And I want to talk about the new album because it's absolutely amazing and it just came out. But I was listening recently and I have 3 of your albums here that I want to show, and they're the last 3 I think that you put out, which is Stranger, Clear Language, and then Now the Wind. And so I would love to chat about them because they each, with each record, the group has evolved tremendously. Mm-hmm. The sound has changed and it's been pretty remarkable. So the one that I'm going to show first is Stranger. I believe this is I think this is the 6th album.
Yes, and, something like that.
2012.
Yep, 2012.
And this album has a lot of like electric guitar, has drums, like a lot of driven beats. There's a lot of the repeating patterns that sort of develop and then dissolve, and wonderful melodies that sort of slip in and slip out. I don't know how to describe it. This is an album that I listen to. It's not one that I put on in the background as much as the other 2 albums, which, I love to be able to do both with records, but this is one, if I put it on, I have to listen to it. It's really incredible. On this album, there are 4 songs. I'm going to show the back. Juby, Artifact, Shore, and then Pyracantha, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, and each of these songs, I was listening to this, has a main guitar part in it, but each of the guitars sounded, all 4 of them have different sounds, different feels, different takes on. There's an acoustic, there's electric, there's a different sounding electric. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about that and your guitar work on this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm a guitarist for those who don't know, and the band started as a duo, just Rob and myself, and through the years we added instruments and people and textures, and this is sort of the culmination of that growth to our most kind of maximum sound. The live iteration of this music had 6 people on stage with 20 plus inputs.
Wow.
Lots of too much. It was kind of stressful being on tour, especially when there's a short window for the load and sound check and all that. But this came in a point where we had kind of exhausted the formula of kind of like the stark, simple piano, guitar, 3-piece string section, and we wanted to kind of push it. So we added a lot of synthesizer, Juno 60 and Prophet, and there's all sorts of strange effects. There's steel drum on this. There's a lot of vibraphone.
Vibraphone, steel drum. You have a song where there's a violin player and a guitar, and you on guitar trading licks. It was like awesome, and it wasn't like fiddle. It was like violin. It was beautiful.
So this music took a long time to kind of. We recorded it piece by piece over maybe a year in 3 different studios. But most of this was recorded at Soma, which is was now a studio in Portland, but used to be in Chicago, which
Oh,
John McIntyre from Tortoise runs and operates.
great band.
Amazing. They're the impetus for my musical brain as an adult, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a pleasure to work in there. We wanted to work with him as a producer and engineer, but Yola Tengo had booked him just a few days before we got there. So he ended up not being able to do it. But our old front of house engineer for our live setup was working there at the time. And so he engineered it in the studio. So we got to use most of their gear. Our percussionist was like a traditional classical percussionist. So he has like great chops on a drum kit, but also with marimba and vibraphone and steel drum and all these different things. And yeah, so Rob plays guitar too.
Okay.
So I grew up playing like punk guitar and electric guitar, and Rob came more from like a folk finger-picked acoustic style. So that's kind of this strange blend that we get. And we do like to experiment. Like Juby, there's a capo pretty high up. So the key changes a lot higher than, you know, it sounds pretty high. It's pretty interesting. And then Shore, we use an adapted capo on an open tuning. So there's a lot of open strings. And yeah, like you mentioned, this is a maximal thing. There's a lot going on. Took a long time to rehearse this all to get it right for the live. We had to use a click track and in-ear monitors and these kind of things to make it all work. So
I've recorded ones with a click track. It's really fascinating. It's a whole different way of thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
takes some getting used to for sure.
Yeah.
But this came out 2012, like you said. It is double, oh gosh, it's stuck in, there we go. Double 45 RPM cut, which is nice, but like with our new one, same as well, 45. A lot of people don't see that on the center label, so I think it sounds pretty strange on 33.
It sounds pretty good on 33 too. I did that one.
That's great.
You know, and on that record, as well as all of your records, the way that it's recorded and the music that you do, you create a sonic space. There is like a room with a pocket, a sound, a way that's being held in each of the songs. It's like walking into a different room in a literal sense. And this album, Stranger, is a little bit edgier than the next two albums. It's almost prog rock at times.
Yeah, there's a lot of electrical components, and then a lot of distortion and a lot of effects and processing on a lot of the instruments that went into this.
Yeah.
But this was a challenge to learn. The artwork was done by a guy in New York named Mario Hugo, who does great stuff. And this image is from a Danish photographer named Trina Sondergaard, of a traditional, these headdresses that this kind of island people, these kind of old Danish people on this island have these kind of festivals and wear these brightly ornated flower masks. Kind of bizarre.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. This album was my first introduction to Balmorhea because I saw somebody was actually showing it. I don't think it was you on Vinyl Community, and I thought, oh, I haven't heard that album, and I went on Spotify and listened to it, and it just completely blew me away. And I didn't even know that it was your band until later, or that your band, but that it was your band. And so I was listening to your music and knew you at the same time and didn't know it was you.
That's funny.
Later. When I think you did a video on neoclassical music, and I think you mentioned your albums in that video, and I went, "Oh, that's Michael."
That's funny. And now here we are. And it's funny. And you're in Portland, Oregon, and we've played there, I don't know, 7 or 8 times over the past decade at least. So
I've never seen you.
We've been within miles of each other and not known it.
Yeah. Well, if we get to see live music again,
I know.
You get
One day
I will show up and hopefully get a chance to hang out in person too, do some crate digging.
Oh yeah.
So the next album I want to show then is your I think 7th album, which is Clear Language, which is, I'm curious about the title of that. We can talk about that. But this came out in 2017. And again, this is a little less drum and guitar heavy, like electric guitar heavy. This is a little more ambient than Stranger. It still creates incredible pockets of sound, incredible sonic space that you get to sit in and just, this is an album I can put on and listen to in the background, fine. And it's also an album I can just sit down and just listen to. And that's true of all your albums. I think they all can be, they almost need to be listened to. They're not really good music as much as they are good music. So
that's great.
And so this is a little more, excuse me, minimalistic than the last one. And I was curious too, and I hope that this is okay if I ask this. The previous album sounded like a live drummer, and this one sounded like there might have been a drum machine.
Yes, I don't think there's any legit drum kit on this album. I think there's 2 tracks that it's a drum machine. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So still kind of pulling a little bit of that electronic influence mixed with the acoustic instrumentation.
Yeah, there's a song on here called Echo. And that's my favorite song on this album.
Oh, that's funny.
The guitar work, I mean, it's the sound of the guitar. It's beautiful and almost angry at the same time, the way that you have it processed. And yet the melodic structure of the song is incredibly beautiful. And I love that kind of dynamic between those two, the dark and the light. And I just love, this is a great album, but that's my favorite song on this album.
That's so funny. I was just talking to a friend who asked me what the sound, how I got that sound in the song called Echo, ECCO, which is the Italian word for echo. And we called it that because it's actually not a guitar, it's a Fender Rhodes organ.
It is.
Yes, and it's going through a big muff pedal, which is a fuzz pedal, then going to a space echo. So the working title is just Space Echo Song. And then, I mean, there is this tape delay that you hear and this kind of modulation. So we were like, well, what do we call this? That's the hardest part, is naming an instrumental song when there's not a clear, theme. But yeah.
So that isn't the guitar. There's no guitar on that song at all then.
It is just a single Fender Rhodes organ going through some effects.
That's great.
Tape delay, yeah.
Incredible. And I was curious, I wanted to ask you, listening to this album, it reminded me of an artist that I listen to a lot. Are you familiar with Bob Holroyd?
I don't think so.
He's a UK artist. He does a lot of electronic stuff, but he also brings in live musicians and incorporates it with his music. And this album, some of the songs reminded me of one of his albums a lot. So if you've not heard him, I recommend checking him out. I never show him because I don't think he puts out vinyl. I think everything he's done has been on CD or MP3, so I'd never show him, but amazing artist.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, for sure. You have to send me a link when we're done here. Yeah, so this was, Stranger was a maximalist kind of effort. We put out 2 7-inches after that, and we re-released our first record and remastered it. So that and we toured a lot after that, and then took a year off, and then we made this. This was recorded in a studio called Church House in Austin, Texas, by a great Australian engineer, and on a beautiful old Steinway from the 19-teens. And there's no cello on this or upright bass, which our previous records all had, minus the first one. This just has violin and viola, piano, vibraphone, some minimal bass guitar, electric guitar, and acoustic guitars. And one song does have a trumpet, which is the first brass we'd used.
Wow.
Great trumpeter in Austin named Ephraim Owens, who plays with Tedeschi Trucks.
Okay.
But yeah, this is, like you said, there is a little more of an ambient kind of feeling. All the electric guitars are atmospheric, kind of billowing, kind of tones. And yeah, we made a trio of videos that went along with the music videos. The same person who did the artwork, an artist named Claire Cottrell, that was all shot on iPhone. So she would capture all this stuff on iPhone and then put it through a TV and then capture it through like a high-res camera on the screen, which is why it kind of looks like it's a bizarre touch.
Yeah, it looks pixelated.
But if you go to, I think Balmorhea Musique is the YouTube channel, you can see those videos. But the clear language title is just a very, very loose kind of overarching kind of a title to, this was 2016 when we were making this. So that was a time when we were moving into a weird thing politically in the US, weird for me at least. But it's just about how things can be communicated without words, and how music and other arts kind of transcend spoken language, spoken word, and getting to the root of how we can communicate as humans and express ourselves and show beauty and show emotion sensorially without using voice.
Brilliant. Can I ask you also, Michael, you mentioned that the guitar on this album was way more like billowing and sort of, are there guitarists that influence you?
For sure. I mean, I think when we were writing this material, I was really deep into effect pedals and building my pedal board. And I mean, I love Robin Guthrie, and I love, kind of the Eno sound that he and Daniel Lanois and Harold Budd were into in that era. So it's in terms of like atmospheric guitar stuff, I was really after trying to find the perfect reverb and the perfect volume pedal to swell in and out of that stuff. So I kind of found a sound that I was happy with, but it's kind of like this never ending hunt for like the perfect tone. Which is, I don't know if there is a perfect tone, but this is what we ended up with on this one. But
when you hear it in your head a certain way, you want to find that. Yeah, I think of like somebody else like that. Andy Summers was a guitar player who was good at that kind of thing, that sort of swelling guitar and creating space with the guitar instead of taking up space necessarily. Kind of what
Slow Dive is another one.
That
I love. I kind of took a lot of inspiration from. So kind of that, the kind of shoegazy 80s hazy chorusy, although I don't really use any chorus, but just the kind of mood that they were able to get out of their instrument.
Cool. And then, here we go. So when I heard about this album, I pre-ordered it right away. So this is your new album. You were signed by Deutsche Grammophon for this album, The Wind. And this just came out. I just got it in the mail. And this is a true audiophile pressing. This is an astoundingly beautiful album to listen to. Musically, it's incredible. It's way more atmospheric, way more minimalistic. I don't think there's a drum of any kind on this album. I don't remember hearing an electric guitar on this album. So I'm curious if I haven't had a time to listen to it many times.
It's all just a Fender Rhodes organ.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
And but also just listening to this record, I find myself sitting in a chair in front of my speakers, listening not just to the music, but to the guitar, the sound of the guitar, the sound of the keyboards. It was just beautifully recorded.
Thank you. Yeah. So we recorded this in 2019, the fall of 2019, and it was mixed and mastered right before Christmas. So just a couple months before the pandemic and COVID swept us. So we were lucky to get it finished. It just came out, like you said, a few weeks ago, and that delay was due to everything in the record industry and pressing plants closing, and all of our previous 6 studio albums and our live album were all on Western Vinyl, which is an independent label based in Austin, Texas, who we are great dear friends with still and amicable. But our contract there was up, and we've done a lot of touring in Europe and kind of identify with a lot of the the European neoclassical, modern classical crossover, whatever you want to call it, people, and sort of have a loose overlap with that world. And it just so happened that, you know, we toured about maybe a decade ago with Nils Fromm, and
Mhm.
became really close friends with him. And we shared the same booking agent, and now his manager and co-operator is the same guy, Felix. And they got the studio space together in this building called the Funk House, right on the Spree River. And we had played a concert there, and after the show, Nils was like, "Come check out the studio," and we kind of had a little after party. And at that time, it was still private. You know, we just, you know, saw all of his instruments and all these vintage Neumann microphones and all this stuff, and we're like, it would be amazing to work in here. And he's like, "You do it, let's do it." And so we made the plan to come to Berlin. Wrote all the material over the span 2018 and 19. And when we were making our plans to come to Berlin, we were talking to our publisher, who's based in London. She used to work with Max Richter, and she helped kind of broker Max's deal with Deutsche Grammophon. And so she kind of connected us, and we really hit it off, and it was the perfect timing. And the new repertoire of Deutsche Grammophon, Johann Johansson, Max Richter, Hilder, and now they got Brian Eno, and they just signed Moby and Dustin O'Halloran and these guys. So we are extremely honored and humbled, and still kind of pinching ourselves that it all worked out. But it came out great. All the guitars were done to three track 1-inch tape, and then everything else was done digitally, but in the highest possible way we could have done it, all on vintage tube gear, and like it came out great.
Yeah. Yeah. You're pretty happy with it, I take it.
I am. I mean, vinyl is not a perfect medium, as we all know. Sometimes the pressing is weird, or there's like a scuff, or there's some sort of noise. It's inevitable, you know, when you're pressing. I don't know, they did a few thousand of these on the first run, that a handful of them are something will be wrong. Everyone's system is different. Everyone's cleaning regimens are different of their stylists. And, you know, you can't please 100% of everybody with a vinyl record. But, you know, it came out great. And it's about 46 minutes in length. So that's too much for a single 33 cut. So we decided to do it over 2 records, and just do it at 45. So talking to the mastering engineer, she was like, you know, the cutting head is moving that much faster, and so it actually is more silent. So the cutting is a little bit more precise on a 45 RPM, which lends to a little bit of quieter playback on most systems. So.
Yeah, it's incredibly beautiful. The style of this record, so this is way more ambient. And was there an electric guitar on here at all?
The first and last songs have electric guitar. I'm trying to think. I think that's it. And we just posted a video on YouTube of some behind the scenes, and I think there's a scene. I use an EBO, which is just like this little handheld device that's battery operated that generates a sound wave that reverberates the string and causes it to kind of intonate.
Yeah.
So that's on the last song especially, you can hear that this kind of single static high pitched sound coming through. But there's a little video clip of me doing that in the studio. But those are the only 2 that electric guitar are on. And there's all sorts of acoustic guitars and nylon guitars and 12-string guitars and stuff throughout. But it's mostly piano based. Compositions kind of chamber, I guess you could say it's almost like a chamber ensemble, like kind of Baroque leaning in terms of the instrumentation, cello, and then there's some French horn, bass clarinet, pipe organ, harmonium, a little bit of Juno 60 and a memory Moog synthesizer, just for some kind of underlying accents. And we doubled some of the low end on a Moog Taurus pedal, which is like a bass foot pedal, and analog synth. And then there is a lot of choral work on this. We had our friend Lisa Morgenstern, who is an exquisite vocalist, like perfect pitch, lives in Berlin, came in and for just a single day, just like knocked it out of the park. And we took all these extra takes and ended up using a lot of that.
Where have I heard her name before?
I found her through just randomly through Spotify from a playlist, but she had
Oh,
done some concerts with Olafur Arnalds, the Icelandic
mm,
composer. She did a support slot on a couple of his tours in Europe.
okay. So, and would you say this album is more like neoclassical?
For sure. So
Yeah.
that was one thing we discussed when we were planning the release is what genre to classify it as, because each digitally and physically you have to select a genre for it to be categorized in the way they organize all the back end. But there actually are different rules. If something's classical in Spotify, you have to legally list all the performers.
Mhm.
So if you look on Spotify, it lists every performer on each song's name with a link to their artist
Wow.
profile.
Wow.
And previously, a lot of, I mean, for all intents and purposes, a lot of the songs are pop, like quote unquote, in terms of the structure. But this one is classical crossover is the technical one, but it's kind of listed in the classical genre.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. I mean, the evolution of those three albums was remarkable.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Thanks.
clearly you. I can hear some of the same processes of song structure, etc. But wow, just entirely different records.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, we spent so much more time and energy and effort and money making this than any other record we've done. We had
Mm.
maybe a 2 year break from Clear Language coming out to when we were recording this. So we, once a week we would get together at least and work on stuff. And we recorded, demos and demos and demos. And we actually recorded a lot of stuff that didn't make it on here that we're hopefully will release later on, but from the same sessions. But yeah, it came out well. And Jonathan Lowe is the engineer. He produced it and engineered it. And he has a studio in upstate New York that we mixed it and mastered it at. And he's already on board for the next one. So super excited. We're
Yeah,
gonna do the next
this
one
is
with him as
such a
well.
beautiful record. All three of these records were I'm just like blown away, Michael.
So glad.
It's so really just amazing stuff. So thanks for being willing to talk about that during this video. I know we were going to just do a music, standard one of our videos, but I really was happy that you're willing to talk about this.
Yeah, of
Amazing.
course. Yeah, this is streaming everywhere. I think all the US orders, one channel of the US orders I was doing myself. I've just run out, so I have some coming soon, but you can get it at any good record shop or online at Music Direct, Elusive Disc, or the dreaded Amazon. If you have to, if there's no other way.
And then you mentioned that you might have some records that you wanted to show that were like influences musically.
Yeah.
So do you want to show some of those?
Yeah, like I mentioned to you a minute ago, and I've talked about ad nauseum on my own channel, is that Tortoise was kind of the music that broke my mind open and showed me what music could be. I have these two 7-inches folded out here, Tortoise. But Tortoise was a Chicago band, kind of a
Mhm.
post-jazz, post-rock, experimental instrumental group that started, their first record was in 94, and that's the first one I heard, I think the summer of 95. And all those artists are in countless other projects. There's like 10 or 12 other artists that are from that, stem from that tree. One of which is this group called Pullman. Tortoise was started by Doug McCombs, who is a bassist. He plays all the bass in Tortoise and now plays in the Sea and Cake as well. Pullman is a 100% acoustic group. So there's acoustic bass and multiple acoustic guitars and other bizarre instruments. This was put out on the same label, Thrill Jockey, I think in 98. So this came out in 98. So this is kind of concurrent with Tortoise's other stuff, but this really informed my acoustic guitar playing. My dad grew up listening to folk music, the Kingston Trio, the Clancy Brothers,
Yeah.
Paul Simon, that kind of stuff. So my dad played guitar and taught me how to play, the basics of guitar. But this has a lot of just really bizarre tunings and just very interesting instrumental acoustic, I guess you would call it folk, experimental folk kind of music.
Okay.
But this kind of blew my mind, and it's like this is when I started experimenting with open tunings and different capo situations, and cutting my capo so it only covered certain strings. And
Wow.
yeah, it goes wild. But this is they released 2 full lengths. This is the first one. It's really great listening. It's kind of,
I'll have to check it out.
yeah, it kind of flew under the radar for most people. And I think that on the 20-year anniversary 3 years ago in 2018, they did a repress, which I think maybe it sounds a little bit better than this. They remastered it. So that was one that, at least for the acoustic guitar portion of Balmorhea, was a huge influence. And if someone likes Balmorhea and is curious what else they should listen to, or if they know music and they know the music through the 90s and the aughts, they're like, who were your influences? This is probably the one that makes the most sense, is Rachel's. Rachel's was a band from Louisville, Kentucky, Quarter Stick Records. So they're kind of tangential to the Chicago, Louisville connection of bands like Slint and Tortoise and
Right. So much good music came out of Louisville.
So much.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, Will Oldham and
Yeah.
all those guys, Palace Brothers and Juno 44, and all these different bands kind of from that era, Steve Albini and those folks.
Yep.
The Chicago connection. But this is the most similar sonically to like the core Balmorhea sound, I would say. It's fronted by Rachel Grimes, is the namesake. And she's a pianist, but this has cello and it has percussion and acoustic guitar and a lot of experimentation, brass and woodwinds and all sorts of stuff. But for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like post-rock experimental instrumental, but it does lean heavily on classical instrumentation. This is my favorite of theirs. It's called Systems Layers. This was repressed a few years ago. Originally came out in 2003. This is a really great listening. Double cut here, 33 RPM, but they have a handful of releases that are all great.
I'll have to check that out. I'm not familiar with her, and yes, I mean all the other groups you mentioned out of Louisville, I'm like, yeah, I have that. It's like amazing music coming out of there, but I haven't heard it, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, check this one out. And one of the main other songwriters passed away a handful of years ago. But Rachel still plays music just under her own name, Rachel Grimes. But definitely worth it checking out. Beautiful, cool. Beautiful music. One more influencer. I mentioned Max Richter or Max Richter.
Yeah.
But when this is a repress on Deutsche Grammophon, but the original version of this is hugely influential. When we were starting, this came out, I believe, in 2006 or 5. The Blue Notebooks.
Mm-hmm. I've not heard this one.
This is his second studio album. Features Tilda Swinton, the actress, doing some poetry reciting on this one. And this is a repress. I think it was remastered, but very minimal piano driven, some solo piano and like very beautiful string quartet. Beautiful stuff. If you don't know Max, you've heard his music. He's scored countless TV shows and films, and beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I own one of it. I think did you do a Vivaldi?
Yep, the Vivaldi Four Seasons Recomposed.
Yes.
Yep.
I have that, and beautiful.
I think that was the first one he did when he signed to Deutsche Grammophon. And then they've slowly re-released all of his catalog. I think he had 4 or 5 other records before that. And I think they've done a box set now at this point, at least on CD. But those are kind of the 3: Tortoise and all the Tortoise adjacent records, Rachel's and Max were kind of the first 3 like main artists that inspired our sound, and we were kind of looking to for inspiration in our own composing.
That's Tortoise too. I think, didn't they have an album called TNT?
Yep.
Yeah, that was
97.
Oh, that was just mind blowing to me.
Totally.
The amazing record.
Yeah, no one else sounds like that.
Yeah,
Just
it's so fun to discover something that doesn't sound like anybody else too. Yeah, which is how I felt about your music.
ah, I'm
Yeah, really did. I mean, when I heard Stranger, by chance because somebody else showed it and listened to it, I was like, wow. And it was one of those strange things where I listened to it on Spotify. I thought, I'm going to look for that record. And then like a week later, it showed up in the bins at Music Millennium here,
oh,
used. And I grabbed a copy of it. It was like magic that happens sometimes when you
that's great.
want to do something and there it is.
You were supposed to listen to that.
Yep.
Hmm.
So great. Thank you so much for being willing to
Yeah,
share about your
I'm
influences,
so
music.
happy to share.
Yeah.
And we were going to talk about maybe some stuff we were listening to recently, right?
Yeah.
What are you spinning on the turntable over there?
So I brought this out because a couple of reasons. One, I just got another pressing of this album. Two, because it was one of those records that when it came out, it completely bent my mind about what music, pop music or what, it was just such an outrageously different album. And it's the Beach Boys, Smiley Smile.
Oh, wow, I don't
This
know that one.
album came out in 1967. This is a first pressing from the UK. So I'll show the.
Oh, that's nice. Where did you find this one?
I found this Music Millennium on the wall on the, wish you had it expensive. It has a flip back cover back here. Came out in
Beautiful.
1967. It's really old. This is the first pressing from the UK, and they actually had contract problems, so they put this out on Brother, I think is the name of the label, but internationally they still had to do Capitol. So this is a really interesting
Oh, interesting.
Capitol label that they had for their UK release. It sounds beautiful. What was interesting about this record to me, have you heard this?
I'm not. Nope.
Okay, so this is the album that followed Pet Sounds. And Pet
Mm.
Sounds was the album that put them on the map. I mean, they were popular. They had all their surf songs and stuff like that. But Pet Sounds put them on par with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. It sold as well. It was reviewed as well as Sgt. Pepper's and the Rolling Stones albums that came out at the time. And the single from this came out before this album was put together. They were actually putting together an album called Smile, which was supposed to be a double album of Brian Wilson's like complex musical journey. And because they had contract disputes, they never put it out. And instead they put this out, and I'll say a little bit about that. But the single they put out right after Pet Sounds was Good Vibrations, huge hit. Also a strange pop single. And if you really listen to that song, it's just an unusual song. It's strange.
Mm-hmm.
And then Heroes and Villains was another one they put out off of this, which again was a really strange pop song. It has great hooks, but they transition in the middle of the song to something else. It's just really weird. Those are the two songs that were going to be on Smile. And when they had the contract disputes and everything got sort of slowed down, they got shelved that album. Brian went into his home studio and put together this album, which is mostly lo-fi home studio recordings of really strange music.
Oh,
I mean, some of the songs on here, I'm trying to remember, Fall Breaks and Back to Winter, Woody Woodpecker Symphony, instrumental, really strange music. One of my favorite songs by the Beach Boys is called Vegetables on here, a little pop song called Vegetables about eating vegetables. Really a song called She's Going Bald. I mean, it's just really strange.
Not your typical mainstream pop music.
Not at all.
In the late
It
'60s.
did not chart well. This album, the single Good Vibrations charted well before that, but that came out well before this album. And it's an entirely different song than the rest of this album.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was a really well-produced song. They probably spent a week producing that song and then 2 weeks producing the rest of this album.
Interesting. Well,
yeah,
it's cool you found it.
Yeah.
Did you own it? Did you own a copy when you were younger?
I did. I bought it when it first came out.
Mm.
And listened to it, and I was perplexed. And I'm like 67, so I'm like 9 years old.
Amazing.
And I'm like expecting the Beach Boys,
Right.
and you know, Good Vibrations was cool, but it was weird. But the rest of the album was really strange. I had to really listen to it, and I learned to love it. It really kind of broke my consciousness in terms of how I perceived music at the time.
Yep. Interesting. Great. That's that's an important album for you then.
Yeah.
Awesome. Should I show one now?
Yeah. Please do.
Let's see. On my channel, I've mentioned a handful of times the music from Mali, Mali, the country in West Africa, and specifically the instrument, the kora, Kora, which is kind of a hollowed out gourd with a vertical neck that suspends these strings that's sort of played with your fingers. It kind of sounds like a harp or a lute. We were on tour in Europe with Balmorhea in 2000, on the Stranger tour. I think it was in 2012. And we had a night off somewhere in the south of France in a town, I think it's called Pau, P-A-U, which is kind of near south of Bordeaux, like near the Spanish border. And we got to the town a day early, and we were playing in this town the next night. And the promoter putting our show was like, "Oh, I have a concert tonight too. You should come to the theater." And it was this guy, Ballake Sissoko, and Vincent Segal. So they were, I think they were on the tour for this record.
Huh.
I didn't never heard of either of them. I didn't know what the kora instrument was. And I was completely like jaw on the floor, spellbound, like couldn't move, like, what are these sounds I'm hearing? Like, so Ballake is a kora player and Vincent Segal is a cellist. And it's just these two instruments kind of moving together. And so it has these kind of, I mean, the kora is like an ancient, 1,000-year-old instrument. So a lot of the melodies and things are things he's learned, from his ancestors from hundreds of years back. So there's kind of this ancient, very visceral, kind of tactile, I don't know how to explain it. The sounds that he gets from this instrument are so intimate. Like it's very, very like fundamental feeling. And especially what's paired with a cello, it's kind of mixing this kind of folk instrument with this kind of nice classical sound that we know and love of a solo cello, but put together just totally mesmerizing. And this is, I think they did 2 records together, but this one's called Musique de Nuit, Music of the Night.
2 of them. There's no other percussion or anything added.
Nope, nothing else. Just
Wow.
cello and the kora. But I've listened to him for a long time, but I'd never thought to look for it on vinyl. And one day I randomly was listening to it and I was like, oh, I wonder what is on vinyl of his. And through searching all this stuff and tangentially coming back to Mali and the kora through Richter and his work with Ali Farka Touré. And Ali has a couple records with another Malian kora player named Toumani Diabate.
Right. With them, yeah.
Right. So if you know that, it's very similar. Ballake is maybe a little more slow and a little somber, not as quite vibrant and like aggressive. Not that Toumani is aggressive, but this is a little more like mellow, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm trying to remember the kora. How many strings does it have on? Is that a 4?
I believe at least 12, but it may even have more.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's some it's a big gourd that you kind of hold on the ground, and then the stem, the neck kind of goes up, and there's these 2 little handles out of the top of the gourd that you kind of rest the crook of your thumb in, and then your fingers are free to pluck. But there's all sorts of runs they do that kind of go up and down.
Mm-hmm.
They do like 6 or 7 notes in this, in one beat and then come back. It's really beautiful.
Wow.
It's the kind of thing that, like you were talking about active and passive listening. Like if you put it on and sit and pay attention, it's like pretty mesmerizing. If you have it on the background and are trying to focus on something else, it could be a little distracting at times, but pretty beautiful. Very like rudimentary, like kind of base level music connection to the brain. I don't know, something special about it.
I love your description of the intimacy. I love when music does that, when you feel like there's an intimate feeling with it. The way they record it, the way it's recorded, the room it's in, the space it creates, and the sound of the instruments. If it's not too processed, there's this much feeling that goes with it that's really profound.
Yeah, for sure. What's next for you?
So I just came across this. I love this album. This is, I came across this as the first US pressing of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Kicking the Pricks. And I love Nick Cave. And this is one of his, like, in the middle, he does stuff where he gets soft and kind of acoustic and somber. And he just, stuff like with Birthday Party that's kicking ass, raucous stuff. This is in the middle. Do you know what the term "kicking against the pricks" comes from?
Is it from a Johnny Cash song?
I don't know if it's in a Johnny Cash song. The term, I did a little research because I didn't know. Nick Cave got it from the King James Version of the Bible. There's
which is
this phrase in there in, I think it's in Acts, but I don't remember what verse.
So interesting.
But essentially, in those days, they would prod oxen with like a metal stick that would poke them and prick them. And if they kicked against that, that was kicking against the pricks. And the phrase was meant to describe kind of the futility and pointlessness of an action. Like there's no point in kicking against the pricks.
Right. Interesting.
Right. Which is a great title from a guy, Nick Cave, who has been made a living out of kicking against the pricks.
Yeah.
He's not going to go with the flow.
No.
So this is an album of cover songs. You mentioned Johnny Cash. He covers Johnny Cash, Lou Reed, John Lee Hooker. He has a cover of Hey Joe on here, a cover of By the Time I Get to Phoenix, which was a Glenn Campbell hit written by Jimmy Webb. So it's all cover songs, and it's really unique what he does with each of the songs, and I really enjoy this record.
Cool.
It came out on, this is the first US pressing. It came out on Homestead Records. And
Nice. Love that label.
yeah, and I have a penchant for loving to get a hold of first pressing, so ran across this and just was blown away. It's awesome. Great record. I have a remaster of this too, but actually I like the first pressing better.
That's the first pressing you're showing there?
Yeah, the first US pressing.
First US, cool. Yeah, there's a Johnny Cash song. I can't remember the title of the song, but it says, the whirlwind was in the thorn tree, and then something else, and it's like, it's tough for thee to kick against the pricks.
That's where, same thing, right?
It must be the same reference there.
Yeah, yeah.
But it may have been in Johnny's later in his career, so maybe he got it from Nick, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Great, it's a great line, great name for an album, but yeah.
That's cool.
This came out in like 1986, I think, original for him. Great album.
That's awesome. All right, last one for me. Oh no, two more. This is one I just showed in my last video. This is Nick Waterhouse, Promenade Blue. Here's looking at you, Mark. Beautiful pressing on a label that's new to me called Innovative Leisure. I'd never heard of this label. California label. Let me get this out. This was pressed at Quality Record Pressings.
Really?
It's 180 gram. So I saw that, and then I also saw that the jacket is a Stoughton tip-on with a high gloss cover.
Wow.
I was like, oh man, that's pretty interesting. That kind of spurred me to buy it. And I spun it twice last night for the first time, and it's just okay. The pressing is okay. And as far as I can tell, I don't know if you can see this at the very bottom. Probably can't see it. It says, this is a monaural recording.
Right.
Which I think, and I switched my gear to mono, and I think this was pressed in mono, which is kind of bizarre. The drums are a little unclear. The mids are kind of mushy, but the music is fantastic. It is so good. It's kind of 50s doo-wop crooner throwback, like very kind of West Coast sounding. You can tell by this, the kind of pants up high and the glasses and the hair. Yeah. He kind of has this kind of croonery throwback vibe, but the music is so catchy. I mean, it sounds like it could have come out in the early 60s or something.
I wonder if it sounds better on like CD than it does on vinyl.
I don't know. I mean, if you like the music and you like his sound, it's worth a pickup. It's not a bad pressing by any means, but I was kind of, with all, pressing at QRP and like all the attention to the details of the jacket, I was like expecting something a little more sonically superior.
Do you think that they maybe recorded it that way on purpose because they wanted it to sound?
Maybe so. Maybe so. So if that's true, then that makes sense. But
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to. I'll have to check it out.
yeah, it's really great. I mean, I think it's very like put it on when you're like making drinks or cooking dinner and like hanging out. It's very upbeat without being. It's not bombastic. It's like very easy listening. Pretty good. The first and fifth track, opening and closing of side A, were the two hits for me on that Nick Waterhouse. And this
Wow.
just came out a couple weeks ago, I think.
I love doing that. I love that you do that. You buy albums sort of like blindly.
Yep. Yeah, I listened to it digitally a handful of times, and I was like, okay, if I'm listening, I keep starting back again. Like I must. Well, I like this. I want to support artists rather than just streaming stuff if I can.
Right. I listen to mostly vinyl. I stream stuff before I buy a lot.
Yeah.
So I use Spotify to stream, to hear something I haven't heard before, to see if I like it. But I mostly listen to vinyl at home. It's just support the artists, and the sound is just so much better.
Yeah, totally.
This is my last one, and I just recently picked this up. Hoodoo Man Blues. This is Junior Wells and Chicago Blues Band. This came out in like 1965 originally. This is the 45 RPM double analog productions version of this, and it's beautiful. Somebody showed this on a blues channel on YouTube a year ago or something, and I listened to it on Spotify. I thought, I really want to find this album, and I've been looking for it. You can't, because again, I'm looking for a first pressing. I can't find one anywhere. One of the reasons that I like this album so much is on here, the guitar player is Buddy Guy.
Oh, perfect.
And so Junior Wells got permission. They brought him in. They were going to record an album, and the label Delmark gave him permission to just do whatever he wanted, and it became their best-selling album. Just mine. Wow. They put him on the map as a blues artist. And at the time, it was believed that Buddy Guy was under contract with Chess Records. So they said they would allow him to record, but they couldn't use his name. So on the original pressing of this, he's listed, the guitar player is listed as Friendly Chap. You can show his name on there. But, and also listening to this, it's kind of interesting. Buddy, it's Buddy Guy, but the guitar sounds different. And I did some research, and apparently his amp didn't work. So they plugged it through an organ, a Leslie speaker of a Hammond organ in the studio, which made me think about your comment about the guitar sound that came from an organ. But
interesting.
But so it's the sound of his guitar is different than what Buddy Guy usually sounds like. But it's quite a remarkable album. Really, and talk about intimacy, to hear this at 45 RPM. You feel like you're in, a studio in 1960s recording, old blues, stuff. It just, you feel like you're in the room. You can feel the rawness and the simplicity of it. It's quite a beautiful album.
That sounds great. Yeah, I've seen that around, and I saw that Analog Productions did it, but I've never spent time with the music. Sounds like I should.
Yeah, I'm a blues fan, and they use the Delmark label, which was the label that put it out. Great. Beautiful album. Really, God, I'm listening to this a lot. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've never gotten too deep into the blues world, but I know there's a lot of great recordings and great albums from, the mid 20th century from all those artists.
Yeah. I'm diving in even deeper now. There's recently two of the record stores that I shop for used records. Two of them recently bought a blues collection separately.
Oh, wow.
So I've been going through and.
Do you go to Mississippi Records a lot there?
I used to go there a lot, and during the pandemic, it was harder and harder for buyers to get used vinyl, and so the pickings were slim. And at Mississippi, I saw fewer and fewer used records coming in, and they're selling a lot of new stuff now.
But
So
they repress a lot of stuff themselves, right?
they do. In fact, I recently bought, and they have a new one coming out. I showed Do You Believe It, which is a 3-album compilation of old soul music from the 70s. Phenomenal. They have a new one coming out next month as well. So they do release and press their own stuff as well. I really like digging through bins for old stuff, and they don't have as much now, so I haven't been going there as much.
That sounds great. Well, I'll keep my ear up for the Hoodoo Man Blues. Last one for me, and then we'll send everyone on their merry way. This is the San Francisco guitarist Tommy Guerrero. You may recognize that name if you were a teenager in the 80s. Powell Peralta's Bones Brigade skate team with Tony Hawk and Lance Mountain, Mike McGill, Steve Caballero, and Tommy Guerrero, among others. Tommy is a guitarist and musician now, primarily, also co-owns a skateboard company, but his style is like desert meets surf. So it has like this kind of sparse Western meets like surf music. It's mostly instrumental, really a lot of it's like looped rhythms and looped drum samples with just really catchy guitar and bass. The weather is warming up here down in Los Angeles, so I've been spinning this and a couple of his other ones, but this is my favorite of his, Perpetual. Just really great summertime, sun shining, you're driving with the windows down kind of music. Just kind of sets a really good mood for kind of a warm day with the sun shining.
I'm going to buy that album without even listening to it. Just your description. That's the kind of music I like to listen to. That's
great. Yeah, he has, I think that they reissued a couple of his other ones. They're all sort of similar. Some are a little more, one has like more of like Latin, like Mexican Tejano kind of influence. This one is just more like kind of straight surf guitar.
I love that.
Great stuff. I think he has 5 or 6 records. You should be able to find them.
Yeah.
Without too much trouble.
I'm going to find that. That looks like it. I love surf guitar, and I love when they incorporate. I mean, I think surf guitar came from, Western music, the Western guitar sound. I think it evolved from that. So
makes sense. There's definitely like a sonic overlap in that.
Yeah, they were using, country music was using Telecasters, and the Ventures and the early surf guitar players played Telecasters. They sort of evolved that sound into rock and roll. That's my theory anyway.
Sounds good to me. This is fun, Mark. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for listening to the Balmorhea stuff.
Oh, thank you for producing it. That's incredible. And the new one is out, and I know actually you mailed me the copy that I pre-ordered. So I remember getting it. I'm like, Michael, I'm getting a package from you. My record's out finally. I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah, we did we handled all the US pre-orders ourselves.
Good.
So it's a couple long days of packing boxes, but well worth it.
Good.
Yep, we'll put some links below too if anyone's interested.
We're each going to release this on our own separate thing. So I'm also going to put a link with with a playlist below.
Oh, great! That's so helpful.
Yeah. So people who want to go back and listen to some of this.
Great, amazing, cool. Right. Well, thanks so much, Mark.
Michael, really good to see you. Let's do this again.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.